In today's lesson, we're going to go over solving quadratic equations. Today, you'll learn to use the zero product property to solve quadratic equations. We will review factoring polynomials using your greatest common factor, and then using the zero product property to solve the factored equations. So let's get started. First of all, we need to look at this is in standard form, and this is the form that in the past, whenever we factored, that we start out with. After we go through and use our ABCs to factor, we end up with our factored form, which looks like our parentheses. Okay? After we have it factored, then we just have two additional steps in order to So the two steps that we're going to use to solve after we factored is first we'll take both factors and we're going to set them equal to 0. So we'll say x equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. The second step is to solve for x. Well, this one's already solved for x, so we just get x equals 0. For this equation, we need to subtract 5 on both sides, so we get x equals negative 5. So these would be our two solutions or our roots. Okay, on number 2, we would do the same thing. We would set both factors equal to 0, so we get c minus 2 equals 0 and c plus 1 equals 0. Draw our line. We'll add 2 to both sides, so we get c equals 2. On our second solution, we'll subtract 1 on both sides, and we get c equals negative 1. And last, let's look at number 3. So we're going to take our two factors. Our first factor is 2b minus 6 equals 0. Our second factor is 3b plus 18 equals 0. Then we just solve them both for 0. So because this is our variable we're trying to get by itself, so I'm going to subtract 18 on both sides. So I have 3b equals negative 18. To get b by itself, I'll divide by 3. And so b equals negative 6. For our second equation, we're going to draw our line. We're going to add 6 to both sides. So I have 2b equals 6. I'll divide by 2. And b equals 3. So our two factors would be b equals negative 6 and b equals 3. Alright, now let's put it all together by factoring out our greatest common factor, factoring using our ABCs, and then solving by setting them equal to 0. So the first thing we need to do is check for a greatest common factor, and I see that I do have a greatest common factor, which in this case is 3. So I'll put 3 out front, and I'll divide everything by 3. So I get x squared minus 7x plus 10. And remember, once we get to this point, we're going to kind of ignore our greatest common factor until the very end when I'm writing my answers, or my factors. And then I'm going to use my ABCs. So A equals 1, B equals negative 7, and C equals 10. So we'll multiply our A times C, and we get 10. We're going to list all of our factors of positive 10, trying to find 2 that add up to negative 7. And eventually I find negative 5 and negative 2. Because negative 5 times negative 2 equals 10, and negative 5 minus 2 would equal our negative 7. So then we are going to set our factors over 1, because that's our A value. And our factors would be x. Bottom number tells me how many x's. The top number is my second term. Bottom number tells me how many x's. The top number is my second term. Now I'm ready to solve. So I'll set each factor equal to 0. I don't have to worry about my greatest common factor since it did not have a variable or an x in it. So when I solve, I add 5 to both sides. I get x equals 5. I add 2 to both sides. So I get x equals 2, and that gives me my two solutions or roots.